on this computer, I guess. Okay, so hello everybody. We are starting. So thank you because there's a lot of people that don't show up on Saturdays that might want this in the future. This honestly might be my last Saturday meetup, depending on how things go, or I might just do specialty ones. So let's start with because when I got into the business, it was 31 years ago, and things were a little different then. And let's talk, although it was similar, but let's talk with a short story about how Andres got from graduating last year to his job now. Short version, Andres.
So it's interesting. I never thought that I was going to be involved with any of this, despite being a film major. I went to DePaul in Chicago, so familiar with your guys' lifestyle. And yeah, I'm from Puerto Rico, born and raised there. I went to school in Chicago, and I ended up working at a marketing agency doing social media ads. And I was kind of like, this is it. I'm getting paid, to edit. This is crazy. It looks like I became great friends with them. It was like an internship that turned into a freelance thing. And it was going to be full time. And I'm like, this is crazy. I got to hold on to this because I thought that was it. It's like, I don't know. I don't know how else I'm going to find like a job or anything as an editor. And then the pandemic happened, and then I was like, oh no, it's gone. And I basically, I graduated in last June, and on June, people were calling me, and they were like, kind of like, hey, happy graduation, sorry it's going on, blah, blah. And a cousin, my cousin's husband called. I was saying congratulations and everything, and I remembered that like years ago, I was at his house for Christmas, and his stepdad was there, and his stepdad mentioned that I was like starting college, and I was like, I'm going to be a film major, and he was like, oh, my daughter's an editor, and I was like, oh, okay, and I didn't think anything of it, and I asked him, hey, I remember this. Is there any chance I could have her email or something, your stepsister's email? And he was like, yeah, let me reach out to her. And she was like, yeah, send in my email. And it turned out to be Melissa Kent, who's a feature editor, and she's an ace, and she knows Troy. And she was very patient with me because I knew nothing about the biz. And she explained to me kind of the most practical stuff that I'm sure Troy has mentioned, like the union and everything. And I was like, okay, great. And I was like, okay, interesting. And I was like, I knew more than I did before. And I was like, this seems kind of doable. It seems like there's a path in here. So kind of, I was like, interesting. And I didn't really think anything of it seriously. And then she was like, hey, I guess she liked how the conversation went. And she was like, hey, you should talk to my friend Troy. He runs the diversity program, and he likes, different looking people. And I reached out to Troy because what else am I doing? And then Troy, long story short, Troy explained more stuff. I read his book. Uh, then I met him, and he explained everything. And I was like, okay, this seems like it's definitely possible. And I just reached out to basically, I did everything Troy mentioned. So he was like, you should go to Edit Fest. And I was like, okay, I'll go to Edit Fest. And then I met a ton of people there. And I really benefited from the fact that, so I had to move back to Puerto Rico because I didn't have a job. And it was really interesting because I was like, I realized it was rare that I was benefiting from meeting all these amazing people from my home in Puerto Rico through Zoom, because now Zoom is normal. So no one, I don't think anyone's going to bat an eye when you tell them, hey, is there any chance I could Zoom with you? I feel like before it'd be like, Skype? That's weird. Okay, guess I could do that. And yeah, no, basically what I did, I just reached out to a ton of people, everyone that I had access to.
Well, one
And
thing, and let me interrupt you for a second. One thing he did was in Edifest, and we also did this with the Eddies, is that there were these breakout rooms, not breakout rooms, they were like speed dating where you had 3 minutes to talk to somebody. And Andres literally was like, can I email you? And like got everybody's email addresses. Like he was really not shy about the whole thing. And ended up with like tons of people to talk to after Edifest. And that's one of the differences between you and a lot of other people. Go on.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I should talk about that because that was a huge turning point for me. Because then at Endofest, you're like with all these people who are like, you guys worked on like stuff like I loved and all this huge stuff. It's like, and it's like getting to talk with like Troy. It's like, oh my God, you worked on these huge movies and everything, and and then at Fest it's just more of that, and it's kind of like you get to talk with people like um, William Goldenberg, Oscar-winning editor, and all these things, and it feels like, wow, this is like I can't believe I have access to these people. And you kind of realize that most people, I guess, well, who people who go to these little networking events, they're into it. They're, they want to talk with people, they want to help, and everyone is kind of like approachable, and you find that everyone's nice, and it becomes kind of less scary to cold email people, which is something I really struggled with, because I was like, do they care? I don't want to bother them. And you just gotta kind of be fearless and say screw it, and be smart about it, not be like, hey, let's talk, hey, come on. But I found that people were really receptive, and I was like just upfront about, hey, I'm trying to learn. I don't know anything about, I don't know a lot, and I want to learn from you guys, and I can maybe learn from your path. And then people you were usually like, they weren't working at the time because of the pandemic, so most of the time they were like, yeah, yeah, of course, of course. And so during Edit Fest, uh, it was huge, not only just because it was the networking thing where I got a bunch of people's emails, but so Troy, when I talked with Troy for the first time, he told me, let's work on your resume and your cover letter. And I had never done a cover letter. And yeah, I think he did it with you guys. And then he was like, let's pretend that this Puerto Rican editor, Aleska Ferrero, she's been bumped up to editor on the morning show, and let's act as if she's looking for a post PA, and you can write a cover letter, trying to get that. And I was like, okay, cool. And I was like, how long, when do you want this by? And he was like, 2 days, I guess. And I could tell he wanted it, immediately, or maybe not, but it would look good to do it immediately. So I just watched like a movie of hers that she edited, and I watched like the first and final episode of the morning show, and then I kind of took notes, and I was like trying to like think of quotes that would like could fit in a cover letter. And I wrote the cover letter. Troy liked it, and he introduced me to Aleshka. And Aleshka, which was crazy to me, and Aleshka was super cool because she knows Troy, and Troy's friends are cool. And she really helped me out. And when I went to Edit Fest, she told me, so here's the thing that was really important. When people say keep up, like, keep in touch, they mean it. And, sometimes you might not get a response when you send an update. But for example, this time I was like, oh, I should tell Aleshka I'm going to Edit Fest. Sorry. And I told her I'm going to Edit Fest. And she was like, oh, great, awesome. You should, I'm going to invite you to this Slack group my producer friend, Ruben Lim, created, and you should meet him. He's a good friend. He's a good friend to have. I'm like, okay. And I joined the Slack group, and it's like all these amazing people. That's like, all these crazy editors, and all of a sudden I have like access to their emails. And uh, got to be careful how you steal emails. But I would approach people, and I'm like, hey, I'd love to talk, and and I got to become friends with Ruben, and Ruben would host all these like little events with like interviewing his like past, kind of similar to this, like interviewing his past kind of coworkers, because he's the one who kind of gathers people. He's a post producer, and I would go to all of these, and he would notice me, and then it became a constant that I was always the one who was going, and I always asked the first question. And then people were like, hey man, yeah, like kind of, I see you, I notice you, and it's like, yeah, no, I'm gonna help you out, try to get a job. And you know long story long, I was kind of like, I have to go to LA because that's what everyone says. It's the only way to do it. It makes complete sense. And I have an aunt here, And I was kind of like, hey, can I stay at your place? Trust me, I don't have a job yet, but I swear, I'm gonna get a job. It's like, it's looking good. It looks like I have a lot of friends at this point. And I counted, and I had talked to, from like August to December, I had spoken to like 60 editors, assistant editors, producers. And with all those guys, you kind of realize, not only do you refine kind of your social skills, and you get to kind of like know what questions to ask, which is the most important part for me, because I was like so insecure, because I was like, I didn't know what was a good question. I didn't know, but as you start to get to know people, you understand everything more, the roles of an assistant. And you also, then all of a sudden have like mutual friends with some people, and then people become more comfortable with you, really, in my experience. And I was like, oh yeah, I spoke to your editor, actually. I spoke to your assistant. And they're like, oh, you know her? It's like, yeah, yeah, they're cool. And so yeah, I've spoken to like 60 people at this point, and after much, it was definitely like, it took a lot of convincing to tell like my aunt and my dad to be like, trust me, I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna make it happen. And when that was official, I was kind of like telling everyone, hey, I'm going to LA, let's see what happens. And Troy was always like, let me know when you're coming to LA. And I told him, and he was like, great. And something that was really interesting was that, so I had met an assistant editor who's now editing, Sarah Zeidelman, and we spoke and we got along great. And she was like, hey, you should ask Troy about this book club with no books. And I was like, I don't know what the hell that means, but I'll do it. And I told Troy about it, and I was like, hey, Sarah told me to ask about this. And he was like, we don't really do that anymore, but we do this thing twice a week called Lunch Bunch. Would you like to join? I'm like, yes. And then I join, and kind of like in the first, meeting, Troy's like, kind of like, hey, I'm just looking for a job. And also the greatest thing was that, so I saw in the invite all these names, and I knew half of them already. So I felt pretty comfortable and kind of confident going in there, because I was like, oh, Irene, how's it going? It's been a bit since we talked, all these people that, all of a sudden you feel kind of not so alienated. And yeah, no, when I got there, Troy was like, hey, Andres is looking for a job. And then I got an interview from that, because, Irene Chun, assistant editor, just worked on, she was the assistant on Minari, who just won an Oscar. And and she was like, oh yeah, it's like, I know him. And it's like, I heard about this job. And then she gave me that. And all of a sudden I had an interview, just from kind of like before getting there even. And Ruben Lim, the producer, he told me, hey, have you told everyone you're coming to LA? I'm like, no. I mean, yes, but he was like, no. He said, have you told everyone you're looking for a job? And I was like, well, no, I mean, they know I'm coming to LA, and I don't really know how to like, you know, I don't want to be presumptuous and ask for a job. And he was like, hey, we should catch up. And I was surprised, because he's a busy guy, and we had a Zoom, and he was telling me like, hey, you should really tell people that you're looking around for a job. I know a lot of the people that you've met, and they generally like you, and I trust you to not kind of be dumb about, telling people you're looking for a job, and you should do that. It wouldn't hurt. I'm like, okay, I guess. And then I was like, well, great. So I've met like 60 people, and I know for sure I got along really well with like 25 of them. And I was like, I'm gonna email all of them that, it's like, hey, I'm going to LA soon. I just wanted to, let you know that I'm trying to think of the wording, because the wording was very important for me. But I was essentially telling people kind of like, hey, I'm gonna ask you if you heard of any PA position or anything. I'd love to, throw my name in. Um, and literally everyone, like within a day or two, they were like, yes, of course, no, I'll let you know. And and from that, I got another interview, And it was like all these things. It's like all these calls and kind of like all these emails, you know, built up to kind of this, where I'm kind of all of a sudden being able to have access to these things and hear about jobs that I would have never heard about before. And, you know, it was crazy. It was like Avengers Assemble. It was, I got to, then I got to LA, and this is another thing that it was really important for me. I had gone here and I had been here for a couple of weeks, and, you know, still reaching out to people and talking to them just because, you know, just very interested, you know, want to learn. And, you know, been speaking to people who've like worked on stuff I really love, and it's been amazing. And and I'm trying to think, and yeah, no, and so the more I talk with people, the more kind of comfortable I become. And then all of a sudden, like, people is like have heard of me because it's like, hey, that one guy from Puerto Rico just came from LA. And it's interesting 'cause I'm like, people are talking about me. That's cool. So I'm being like noticed. And this one time I met this editor named John Paul Horstman in one of the lunch calls with Troy. And he edited a movie I adore, and I've seen it like a dozen times. And I was like, I emailed him. I was like, oh, hey, I'd love to talk sometime. And he put his email in the chat, and I reached out to him, and we ended up talking. And he um, he was super nice and everything. I barely talked about the movie I love because I guess I was trying to play it cool and not geek out on him. I got to do that one day. And so I guess the call went well, because then 30 minutes later, he texts me and he's like, hey, I just heard about this post PA job, this Warner Brothers big movie. It's the person that's hiring was an assistant for me on a movie that never came out. You should write a cover letter and send it to her ASAP. I'm like, okay, oh my God. You know, he texted me, like, this is like important. And it's like, I've never written a cover letter so quickly. And I'm like, I also don't know anything about the project. I don't know. All I know is that it's a Warner Brothers movie, and I know the assistant editor. I don't know the editor, the director, anything. So
But
I'm
I
kind
do
of
want
like,
to say that you and I had already worked on cover letters, which makes it
yeah,
so that
yeah,
you
yeah,
can write a cover letter really quickly because you've already
yeah,
have a template that you and I worked on. And that's very
right,
important because when you hear about these jobs, the job will go away within like 2 or 3 hours often. So you
right,
want to be
yeah.
prepared to pull over to the side of the road, write a cover letter and send it in.
Exactly. So that was so I was thinking like I don't know what to do, but luckily I did this months ago with Troy where I actually did one, so I kind of know what the general idea of a cover letter even is, you know, just trying to introduce yourself as a person. Because yeah, you spend 12 hours a day, 5 days a week with these people, sometimes even more. So it's like basically what I found really was that the important thing, something that was really important was that kind of I made friends because you want to hang out with your friends, you know? And it's like I'm working with Troy right now in a movie, and we spend, you know, every day together for, you know, 12 hours a day. And it's like same with the assistant editors and everything, and we all really get along, so it's perfect. And so I was kind of like, okay, well, I did this before. Granted, that took hours to do, but I'm like, okay, let's see. And since I had no information, you know, with assistant editors, you know, you,
Quite often I recommend having a generic cover letter and a targeted cover letter. You almost will never use the generic one, honestly, because you almost always know something about the project. You know, even here, Andres knew the assistant editor on it, you know. So you usually know something.
yeah, yeah. And I was trying to think like, what can I make with this? And it's like, it's interesting because it's like, I can't really, I felt, maybe I'm
You know
wrong,
what,
but I was,
Andres, we have to
yeah,
move you along a little bit. So
yes, yes, sorry.
let's finish because we need to get you to working with me and the fact that you have now gotten
Yeah,
somebody a job because we have to move on to Emma. So
right,
let's
yeah,
just
yeah.
fast forward to that.
So yeah, basically, I wrote a cover letter and then I sent it over, and then I heard I was going to send it over. I was proofreading it, and then she was like, she emailed me, the person that was hiring, and she was like, "Hey, I just got your email, your resume from like 4 different people. you know, this, I'm really impressed. Let's talk. And I'm like, I didn't even have to send it, and I did send it. But
Well,
anyways, yeah, that happened.
Was that to Esther?
That's the Esther.
So,
Yeah.
so the cover letter is actually in the chat now. For everybody that
Oh,
should open their chats, I've put cover letters and resumes in the chat. So yes, that was for Esther, but Esther was not hiring for several months, really.
right,
So
right.
essentially, I hired you before Esther could, you know.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, and when I got here, you know, Troy was like, you know, just in our lunch group, it's like, hey, let's hang, let's bike. And it's like, I just got here, I have no friends. And yeah, I haven't biked in a while. Yeah, absolutely. And through all these hangs, kind of, I just got to know Troy more, and you kind of, you know, become friends. And then one day he was like, hey, I spoke to, you know, Kelly and my friends, and I'm going to give you this job on this movie. And I knew Troy was working on a movie, but I didn't want to be like, kind of like, oh, me. And yeah, and then I heard about it, and now kind of I'm working on this movie on a studio, and my dreams have come true, basically. And
Can you talk for a second about getting Maddie the job? Because now
yeah,
that you have a job, you are hearing about post PA jobs and non-union assistant editing jobs like probably every like 4 days or something.
yeah. So yeah, it's crazy because then, of course, when you get the job, then you hear of a ton of jobs, and you're like, where were you guys before? And so I heard about a job. I'll tell them about Jen real quick, if you don't mind. So I heard about a job. Someone called me randomly in the middle of work. I was like, hello, and it's like, hey, it's me. I'm a producer at Duplass Brothers Productions. And I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, I remember. It's like, yeah, we met for like 20 minutes, like back in October. But I remembered you, and I just wanted to ask of you about your availability for like assistant editing, like on a movie. And I'm like, me? Like availability for me? Like I was kind of amazed. And I was like, oh, cool. I was like in the middle of something at work, and I was kind of like, oh, well, yeah. And I kind of told her like, oh, I'm in a job right now, but I'd love to talk later. Can I just call you later tonight? And she was like, oh, yeah, 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 of course. And and then we spoke, and we got along really well. And basically, she literally was telling me, she was pitching me, and I was kind of like, why is this? Like, I am literally just out of college. I'm, you know, PA on this, you know, don't have like a resume for like an assistant editor. And it was literally just based on my personality. Is she was like, no, I just remembered you. And then I spoke to like my other friends, and, you know, they know you, and, you know, they think you're cool. And it's like, I want to get you because I want to work around cool people. And I was like, okay, crazy. And I couldn't do it because I'm working with Troy. And I was like, but I know my friend who is trying to start working on scripted stuff. She's got her union days. I think you would love her. Her name's Jen. And she was like, yeah, send her over. And I sent her over, and Jen got that job. And it was like, oh my God, like I got to be the one helping, which was really special for me because it's meant a lot to have the support from everyone. And then I heard about another job as an assistant editor at a place where someone can get their union days. And I couldn't take it because I'm working. And I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, I'm unavailable, but I know these people who are like very cool. And they're like, oh, awesome, thank you. And then that girl got the job. And it's kind of crazy how literally just by, you just realize, you know, when people say it's about who you know, it sounds kind of, you know, I don't know, it sounds kind of comical because people say that so much, but it just really is. And you don't even have to be like super great friends with them, you know, because the way this girl Maddie got that assistant editor job was that I heard about this, and I didn't really know. I was trying to think kind of like who's around, and I just sent a message to like a group chat I have with Troy and other editors, and one of them was like, hey, I spoke to this girl, she's really cool, like here's her resume. And I was like, okay, there. And then so basically just because she talked with my friend Kelly one time, you know, she ended up getting a job through like this. So it's kind of like, I cannot emphasize enough that reaching out to people and kind of you know.
Yes. So
becoming
Andres
friends
has
with
now
them,
gotten
yeah.
two people jobs. So I highly recommend you becoming friends with Andres.
Yeah, guys, I'm pretty friendly, so reach out.
I'm going to move on to Emma just because I want to make sure we have enough
Mhm.
time, because Emma's story is kind of interesting too. So Emma, tell us the brief version of your story, which is briefer than Andres.
Okay. Yeah. So I just graduated college this last June, so it's almost been a year now. But so I had an internship lined up, everything, post graduation at a post house, and then the pandemic hit, and it fell through. And I started panicking. I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't know, like, all that stuff that everyone went through. And so instead of moving straight to LA, I ended up moving down to San Diego for a little bit because I have family there. And I was like, well, I want to be close to LA, as close as possible. And I was down there for a couple of months, and I was like, I didn't really know a lot of people in the industry yet. Just like, my friends are like, a lot of freelancers. And so I started I started messaging editors on LinkedIn actually. And that gave me a lot of insight of like what my next step should be. They gave me a lot of like information on like how everything works, and like when you're in the industry, like this is what you do kind of thing. I couldn't find a job that way. It was like I was making like friends that way, but everyone was like, oh, it's all remote right now, so it's like we can't really offer you anything, but we can give you that guidance. And I was like, okay, well, I have to find another way in. And then a friend of mine heard about like the whole COVID compliance officer people on film sets. And I was like, okay, like that's a way in. Like, let me figure out how to get this, because it's, probably easier than becoming a set PA right off the bat. Like, I don't know anyone. And from what I had heard, like they were pretty desperate to find anyone who will, do this job. And so I just got really lucky. And I started day playing as like a COVID PA. And from there, I would meet more people, and they would, get me more day playing jobs on different, TV shows. And eventually I made it to day playing on the L Word, Generation Q. And I was there for a long time, and I became really good friends with, all of, everyone on my team and everyone else. And I found out through one of our coordinators that the post room was right next door to our office. And one day I was in the office doing office stuff. And I was like, hey, like, can I like peek over in the post room really quick? I want to see if like I can talk to someone in there. Like I want to, and they were like, yeah, go for it. And like, I remember like I walked by, I was about to go in, and then I made a sharp left, and I started getting like knots in my stomach. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do this. Like, I'm so nervous. Like, what if they hate me? What if I'm bothering them? And then I was just like, no, like I really have to put myself out there. Like if I don't do this, like I might miss out on something. Like you never know. And so I go in and I start talking to them, and the post PA, she's really nice. Her name is Emily. And I was like, yeah, like I really want to be an editor. Like I just, it's really hard to meet other editors. Like I don't know how to network really. So just like, how did you do it? And she was like, well, it's funny that you ask. Like you should email this guy. And she gave me Troy's email. And she was like, he's a really great mentor. Like, he'll kind of get you through like your resume and everything. And like, like she was like, basically like I emailed him a couple months ago, and he mentored me, and I ended up having this job. So it's like, it'll be really helpful, I think. And then she was like, but you have to get his book first. Like order it now, email him, tell him you got his book, and then he'll talk to you. And I was like, okay, got it. And I did that.
Actual rule with me when people email me, I'm like, read my book and then email me again.
Yeah. Which is great though. The book is, it really taught me a lot. Like it answered a lot of questions that I had before I read the book. So I was like, like this was really useful. Like I feel like I can go meet Troy now and not sound like a complete like just unknowledgeable person who doesn't know anything about like how anything works in the industry. But so that was great. And then kind of from there, same as I had to fix my resume. It was atrocious. It was, it looked really bad. And then I had to do a cover letter, and I had written cover letters before, but nothing personal really. I didn't really quite understand how to write one. And then Troy sent me a few samples, and I kind of figured out like a pattern. And I think something that really works for me is like I'll watch a movie or a couple episodes of some editor's work, and I'll find something that I really liked from it, and I'll think about why, like, oh, like I like how you did this because it does that for this particular show, and like you can really see that and it's really admirable. Like, I'd like to learn from someone who has the abilities to do these things. And that's what I did for Tracy and Shire, who are two amazing editors that I am officially going to be working with starting in a week. My first post PA job, so it's really exciting. But it's like, because you do these steps, like you really take the time to figure out like what you like from these people, and I feel like being a genuine person helps a lot as well. And I don't know, it's all a lot of hard work. It's a lot of networking. It's like you don't really have time to do nothing, but now like the more I do, the more I realize like I don't really want to sit and do nothing, because there's like, if I hadn't have gone to that post room, I would have never made these connections, or if I hadn't have been in search of something, I wouldn't have gotten the COVID jobs, which were terrible, but it's like it gets you in the door at least.
But
and you
yeah,
can go
so
from
then
there.
because basically Emma then read my book, we met for coffee, and then I said, hey, do you ever want to go paddle? What was the next step? You went
It was
paddleboarding.
paddleboarding, yeah.
So
Yeah, and that was, yeah, that I've never been paddleboarding before that, and I was actually really nervous. It was a big group of people, and I am like fairly shy. Sometimes it's hard for me to push myself to go out and do things, especially if there's a lot of people. But I was like, you know what, like just like with the post room, I'm gonna regret it if I don't do this. And I did it, and just from there, like you make stronger relationships, and I mean, everything, people want to help you, they really do. And that's something that I've really learned is there's a lot of really nice people in the industry, and if you ask for help, like 9 times out of 10 they'll either like be like, yes, I'll help you, or they'll send you to someone who can. So it's just definitely putting yourself out there is sometimes hard, but like you have to do it, and it'll be good. It'll work out. So
right, because what happened was I heard about this post PA job and I put a couple people up for it, but Emma was the only person that wrote a cover letter apparently, because nobody does. When I teach you guys how to write cover letters, nobody actually writes the cover. Nobody in this industry, everybody just sends their resumes in. And I heard about a job, here's my resume. So writing a cover letter, which also can be part of the email, it doesn't have to be its own PDF or anything like that. You stand out, honestly, and Emma says that she did stand out because of that, right? Because when you interviewed, they referenced your cover letter, right?
yeah, and in the email that they sent asking to interview, they referenced it in the interview. They were like, thank you so much for your kind letter. Like it was it was really great. And I was like, I didn't think much of it. I was like, well, my resume is lacking, and because of that, I want to I wanted to submit, I actually really wanted to submit the cover letter, because I was like, I don't have a chance with my resume. And yeah, I mean, and the thing about the letter too is like, I didn't lie or anything. I didn't extend any kind of, or like emphasize any point. I was just like, hey, like I've seen your work. I think it's really amazing. Like, this is exactly what I like about it. And I would be more than like honored to, shadow you guys and see how you work, and like, be a part of your team. And they were, they're like, wow, thank you so much. Like, that means a lot. Like, it's, those genuine words go a long way.
So I mean, you can see with the two of them and with Sophia that I talked about that you can see the pattern. There's actually sort of a DNA to the whole way this works, where now it's like, if you guys don't take the opportunity to contact Andres and Emma, then that's kind of your own fault. Emma, can you put your email in the chat? Although I guess it's on your resume too, but it's better for you to just put it because that's appropriate. In the chat, I have put their resumes. I put these cover letters that some of them have read. She wrote one to Mark also, which she had got an interview for, but she already had a job by then. She's like, what do I do? They're asking me for an interview. I'm like, well, you have a job.
Yeah.
So in the same way as Andres is now getting all of these jobs offers, or can you come in, and that's the way that it works, is like, it's hard to get that first job, but once you get the first job, you getting your next jobs is, they start kind of just falling out of the sky. There is so much work, especially in post-production, but actually in all, you know, whether you're, you know, in the camera department or anything, you know, in LA and in New York, there's actually a lot of work too. So, you know, take advantage of the fact that you have these two people that obviously need to, you know, want to give back to the next people that are coming out, which is a lot of you people. If you don't take advantage of it, then I don't know what to tell you, because, you know, I'm literally teeing it up for you people. So let's open it up to questions. And so let's just Paula has a question.
Actually, Troy, it's more of a comment than a question. One, I got your book. Thank you very much. Okay. Two, I met Andreas already because I did the stuff that you told me to do. Okay. You introduced me to Lenarion. Lenarion introduced me to Andreas. We spoke. Then we saw each other again virtually at the ACE Awards because he recommended, he's like, hey, you should go to the ACE Awards. It's virtual. I'm like, oh yeah, $49. Best $49 I spent. So thank you again. Yes, it works. Listen to Troy. That's all I got.
Oh, one thing I do have to mention, which is the AC internship program applications is open now, from May 1st to June 30th or 30th. So, and if you get it in early, it looks good. Everybody turns theirs in on the 30th. So start, you know, it's another one of those ones, even if you are not picked as the AC intern, it's the best $50 or $100 or whatever it costs that you will ever spend. I will tell you that right now. All of these things, come to EditFest, come to, you know, apply for the internship, you know, and if any of you are not editors, you can still contact me. I know costume designers, I know music producers, I know DPs, I know directors, I know writers assistants. So I will happily introduce you to anybody else. More questions? Like literally your question could be like, if I'm there on, you know, on May 31st, will you have coffee with me, Troy? Like seriously.
I have a question.
Okay, Paige.
I was kind of wondering, what kind of questions do they ask you in like a post PA interview?
Let's have them answer. I have not done that in a long time.
Do you want to get started, Emma?
Sure. I mean, okay, so it was really interesting actually. It didn't happen how I thought it would, but I think that was a really good thing. So they actually just started off by telling me like, oh, here's the job. This is like, these are, you know, this is what you're gonna do. These are the people. Do you have any questions? And I was like, oh, okay. So they don't really want to ask you questions. And then it's like, you know, I'll be like, oh, like what's this? What's that? You know, I asked like, because I'd never been a post PA before. So I was like, well, I understand like the gist of it, but like to you, what would make me a better PA? And you know, they tell you a little bit about that, like, oh, well, here's what works for us, kind of thing. And actually, in my interview with Shire and well, Tracy wasn't there for that one, but Vero, their assistant editor, she was, and so was the assistant and one of the co-editors. And you know, it felt really formal at first, and I hadn't thought back to Troy's book, and I was, you know, he was like, oh, my best post PA like knew our snacks before coming in. And like, I'm a huge foodie, and I was like, you know what, like actually I do have a very important question. What are everyone's favorite snacks? And then, you know, they started laughing, and it kind of made the energy change from like interview to just like, it felt like a hangout almost. And from there, you know, we started talking about like, oh, like these are what we drink.
That is hilarious. Yes, I have a question. Everybody should write that down. I fucking love that.
Yeah. And yeah, it really worked though. It like really broke the ice. And you know, then they started telling me like, oh, like Tracy's from England. And I was like, oh, my dad's from England. Like I drink the same tea as you guys. Like this is weird, like such weird coincidences. Like I feel like, you know, the kitchen's gonna be stocked with some really good stuff. And then we started talking just about like hobbies, and I was like, oh, you know, I like to do a lot of things. I started telling them about how I just bought a blackberry plant because I want to in 2 years after it flowers, I want to make like a blackberry wine. And their assistant editor was like, oh, like I'm really into making like, you know, like booches and like stuff like that. Like I like making like little, you know, bottles of alcohol myself like that. And I was like, that's like really cool. Like if we keep in touch, like 2 years from now, I'll give you one, you know, like see if it turns out good. And it just, you know, it didn't feel like an interview at all. It just felt like, oh, here's a job that we're doing. Also like, hey, like here's some things we have in common. Like, you know, it felt very, I don't want to say informal, but just very comfortable. It wasn't your stereotypical, like, what are you going to bring to the workplace? Or, you know, like, why should we hire you? It's just like, this is the job, like, do we get along kind of thing. It was great though.
Yeah, and I mean, I did an interview for the job with Troy, so that's interesting. But I did interview for one before, for the one I was talking about, the Warner Brothers one, and it was interesting because I like knew a bunch of her friends. Evidently, I didn't even realize this at the moment, but one of the people that sent me in was like one of her best friends ever, an amazing editor called Amelia Allwarden to work with Troy. And so it was really, when I talked with her, it was really more about just kind of like, oh, how did you get to know everyone? And kind of so you got here. And she was kind of like, because she has kind of heard of me in the background. Someone mentions like, you know, the Puerto Rican guy who's talking to me. And so it was just a really friendly conversation. I think she maybe asked me like, she probably asked me like three, like Emma, like three different questions that were just, you know, interview questions that were like kind of like, oh, so how do you feel about this? Also, it's like COVID was especially like kind of crazy back then. So it was kind of like, so how are we, you know, so we're gonna handle this. How do you feel about what's your comfort level with that? But really overall, it was just kind of talking. I had seen her, she edited some amazing short films in college, and I had seen those, and we kind of talked about those too. But yeah, kind of like Emma said, it's really kind of like I think it's kind of, I feel like when people like have these conversations is to see more if it's a personality match. Maybe
I
I'm
would say
wrong.
it's definitely more of that. So in general, I recommend staying away from talking about money and hours and things like that, because you have there's the possibility that you might come off as being like not that into it, meaning, you know, especially early in your career, but even later in your career, like the money comes later. Like they'll tell you later on how much you're going to be paid, or you have to say what your rate is, and all that is like not interview stuff, if you ask me. Like when I interviewed people, when they ask me, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't have the answer to that. Like there's no way that Tracy and Shire know how much the PA is being paid, you know. So
Yeah.
don't even go there, you know, and don't be like, do you think there's going to be long hours? You know, if you say something like that, that literally can make you get not hired, because I'll ask you, the answer is yes, there will be long hours. Anybody that's going to work in the film industry, I'll tell you right now, there's going to be long hours, and you have no idea when you might work a weekend. Like literally this morning, the director was like, are you here? I need you to cut this footage before Monday because we need to know what to shoot on Monday. And I emailed all of the people like Andres and everybody, and like, keep yourself available. I don't know what's going on yet. In the end, it's only going to be my first assistant and me working. But you know, that's how this stuff works. Like I'm going to work tonight and tomorrow morning, it looks like, is what I'm going to be, you know. But just be overly enthusiastic and friendly in the interviews, and don't get into the hours or the pay, you know.
Yeah, I didn't talk about that with them at all. Like they had someone else in some other department email me completely separately, and you know, called me on the phone and said like, oh, here's the deal memo. Like I don't think they know any of that. Like they don't know like the guarantees, or so you know, it's, you know, you'll figure it out later. And it's really more of like, I was just excited to have the job. I was like, you can pay me like dirt. Like I get a chance to shadow some people who are really amazing at what they do. Like that's enough for me, or almost, you know, I still got to pay rent, but like, you know, it's, yeah, the pays comes second, I feel like, definitely.
And you never know.
Yeah.
I think Andres is actually being paid really well on this. Like, I think my assistants and Andres are getting paid very well on my movie. But you just never
Surprised.
know. So you have to be a little flexible when it comes to that stuff too, truthfully.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have a question, Matthew?
Yeah, sorry, I'm going back and forth, trying not to look too eager. It was actually a question kind of specifically for Emma, but it applies to everybody, mostly because I'm actually from San Diego. And so your comment hit home about kind of the making it work. How did you find navigating between when you were living in San Diego and applying for stuff in Los Angeles? Because I think, what's the word? Contrary to popular belief of people that have never been to California before, despite the fact that those two cities are only 2 hours away, sometimes it feels like a lifetime away.
Yeah. So I tried commuting for like 2 weeks and I realized like I cannot do this. And I had been looking for apartments. I hadn't found anything. And then I found the one I'm in now. And I was like actually at the time jobless because I'd been day playing, right? So I didn't have like a full-time anything. I think I went from like broke to having $5,000 in my savings, and I was like, okay, this is it. That's enough. I can put down a deposit, and I can pay for like, maybe the first 2 months of rent, and not freak out. And so I did it. I moved to LA. I was like, if I don't do it now, I'm not going to do it, and I'll figure it out when I get there. So I took that risk, and it's worked out. If I hadn't have done that, I'd probably still be back in San Diego, like waitressing or something. You just sometimes you have to take those big risks. Like 2 hours doesn't seem that bad until you're waking up at like 2 a.m. to be there by 4, and then you have like the drive home, and it's like, oh no, I've been up for 20 hours now. Like I have 4 hours of sleep and I have to do the same thing the next day. It's like, no, you might as well just take the risk and make the move at least for me. I mean, everyone's different, but it worked for me. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, and I understand the logic there.
yeah.
I've worked with people that live in Pasadena and Hollywood that have to come down and up, and it's like I
Yeah.
thought a 30-minute commute was rough, and they're looking at me like, yeah, you have it nice, buddy.
Yeah, but I mean, San Diego was cool. My family's not actually from there, but they live there now, so it was nice to kind of like decompress a little bit post like pandemic graduation. But I was definitely eager to start working too. Like I think that's a big thing, is like I have a lot of friends who moved back home, and they kind of they like lost their momentum, and they're all like, oh, like I might have this unpaid internship that isn't really what I want to do, but it's something. And then I'm over here and I'm like, oh, I have my dream job. Like where, take your risk, like move out of home, do everything you need to do to like fulfill your your greatest dreams. So
Thanks, I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
More questions?
No,
Oh,
yeah.
go on, Matthew. You have something more?
No, if Andreas wants to add to that as well, but
No, I was gonna say, yeah, no, you gotta, take a leap, because I came here with no friends, and it's kind of like, it's kind of, granted, I'm staying with my aunt, and but it was just kind of like, like comfort, basically, because I'm here renting a room for way too much money, but I'm like, it's like allowing me to be kind of here. And even though these guys are loud, they scream, I'm actually in the meeting room because I'm like, these guys are so loud. I don't want, I don't want you guys to hear them. But it's kind of like that temporary discomfort that really pays off. So yeah, like Emma said, take the leap.
Yeah, no, I definitely believe in the concept of jumping in with 2 feet. Like I believe pressure makes diamonds. Like it's really important even later in your career to be like always pushing to do something more. I think it's fun, honestly, to always be trying a little harder than you, rather than kind of relaxing. At least for me. So like I'm working on this movie, but in addition to that, Andres and a couple other people are going to cut a documentary at the same time, about high-speed downhill skateboarding. So, Andres is working on that, and hopefully we'll get some of his union days doing that too, but which is his next step. So anyway, more questions? Come on, people. This is your opportunity.
I have a question.
Right.
I feel like I'm really glad that was mentioned. The sort of I feel like there's almost a theme building in terms of sort of when it comes to getting yourself out there. And then of course, you know, I think it's very common. I mean, me speaking me personally, I think I can sell myself short a lot of the time. So I think hearing that sort of like keeping that energy momentum is very beneficial. But mostly, I think the question that I'm trying to form here is that early on, did you feel like you understood what exactly you wanted to work on? Because and Andres, I'm glad that you mentioned that you went into marketing, because that's also something I've considered myself coming out, working in like a sort of marketing company position. But eventually, you know, whether it's not if you're kind of you feel like you're stuck there, or if it's like if you start freelance then studio, those are the sort of things that, I don't know, would you say you thought of early on?
Me, well, it's interesting because yeah, because I was forced to consider something else by getting laid off. But the interesting thing was that the only reason I thought about asking my cousin's husband about his stepsister was because I was like applying to all these marketing jobs because I was like, that's where I have the most experience in. Like somehow at my age out of college, I already have a year of editing stuff. And it was like for big like clients like the Ritz Carlton and all these things. So it's kind of like, you know, I felt like I was at a good place where I was like, maybe I can get a job. And the more I started applying to places, I was lucky enough to get some interviews. And then I was kind of like, this is like so not what I'm into. Like I realized that I really loved the job I had. It was fun and it was simple and it was like with amazing people. So that was like really, really nice. And I think I was trying to recreate something that kind of was really special and it just didn't make sense. And I just realized like, oh, right, kind of like a lot of these things, these corporate kind of jobs are just kind of boring and not something I'm really interested in. And then kind of talking with everyone who's doing like this amazing, creative, fulfilling stuff that isn't by the numbers. I'm kind of like, wow, so that's if that's possible, I really want to try to go at it. And when you're surrounded by people who I always tell, you know, Troy and everyone, it's like it's really hard to be lazy around you guys. Because all these guys, you know, no matter where they are, like Troy's working on this movie, you know, he's working on this huge movie and everything, and he's working on the documentary and then like all these tiny little things. And same with all the other people we know. Everyone has like a side job, and it's kind of, you know, it's like the passion is clear and it's infectious. And that's why I kind of like, you know, when Troy told me about this documentary, I'm like, oh, is that kind of doable? I'm like, okay, I guess, yeah, let's do it. Um, and yeah, did that answer your question? Not sure.
I mean, I let me go into this a little bit. I highly recommend, like early on in your career, for you to sort of sample different things, because you might really love trailer editing. You really might love editing commercials. You might think you want to make movies, and then next thing you know, you're on a TV show, and you're like, oh my God, television editing is so much more fun because it's kind of, you know, a lot faster. You aren't like just beating up a movie for 6 months. You're watching the same 97 minutes over and over and over, you know. Uh, so and the other thing though, there's a flip side to that, which is that you get a job at a trailer house and you're a post PA and then an assistant editor and then, you know, you're an assembly editor or something like that, and next thing you know, it's 10 years later and you're cutting trailers, and what you really wanted to do was cut television. So be very conscious of the fact that if you are not in the medium of post production or production that you want to be in, uh, time can go really fast. Our friend Jen, like, got out of college. She wanted to work making movies and television. Then she started like following a band around and helping them. And next thing you know, she was in Boston cutting industrials. And then it was 10 years later. I mean, in all honesty, luckily for her, COVID hit and she got laid off, because that made her rethink, like, oh, maybe I should take this chance and move to LA. And the same thing happened where she found me on some interview that I was doing and then contacted me. And then I said, read my book. And then I talked to her a few times. I'm like, oh, this lady seems pretty cool. And next thing you know, we're paddleboarding together. And she got her first job really by herself, but now she got her second job through Andres, who, you know, we paddleboard together. So, you know, then Emma got her job. So the answer is always paddleboard. Yes. But the answer really is take advantage of the fact that, you know, especially on this Zoom meeting and all these other things, you're going to find very friendly people, and, you know, don't be so shy that you don't want to hang out with cool people, you know? So when I say things like, you know, call me or email me when you come to LA, I mean it. Or, and I'm sure Emma would meet up with you for coffee, or Andres will meet up with you for your coffee, or, you know, or a bunch of us can meet up together. But that's really on you, because I don't have the time or patience to deal with people that aren't willing to work hard with me, if that makes sense, you know? So more questions?
I will say, if no one has a question, I will mention that something that was really important when I found that I was talking to people was that I would always prepare. I was nervous, and I was kind of talking to these people who've worked on these huge things. I would literally kind of, you know, my heart would pound before a call, and, you know, it's ridiculous. I think I have some undiagnosed anxiety issue or
No,
something.
no. Everybody has that. I have that even right now. Like if I'm going to call a director, even a director that I've worked like 3 movies with, you still have that. It's like jumping off of, you know, a rock into the water, you know, where no matter what, you have to like take 3 deep breaths and then hit, you know, hit send on the text or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
You are not
Well,
unusual.
Well, that's good to hear. And yeah, I know what I did to kind of help with that. I would, you know, prepare, and, you know, not only would I prepare like at least like 30 questions to fill up an hour if like for some reason the conversation isn't flowing, like, so there's no silent kind of moment. I learned this the hard way because I was kind of like, I was talking to someone, and then kind of like they weren't, you know, very talkative like the last person I was talking to. And I was just kind of like an awkward kind of like end to the call. And I was just like, oh God. And then I started preparing questions and everything. And it always helped when it's like either sometimes I don't even have to look at the questions because it's like conversation just flows, an hour goes by quickly. And then sometimes, I mean, you generally have questions. So it's like, I want to ask like, how was it working with this editor and that? And then I would always watch a lot of their stuff, which everyone always appreciates. And this one time, I saw this movie called Waves that is amazing. Yeah, amazing movie. And I was like, I got to talk to the editor of this. And I looked him up, and it's Isaac Haggie, who edits on Atlanta, and he's like a big music video editor as well, and kind of like amazing, you know, very talented guy. And I look him up, and his emails on, he has a website. A lot of people have websites and they have their resumes up, and that had his email. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna message that. Let's see what happens. And within the week, he was like, hey man, yeah, let's talk. And then we spoke. And oh, before we spoke, I kind of looked him up, and I was thinking like, what would, you know, and I was like, oh, he edited a documentary in college, and it was on Amazon Prime. And I watched it, and it was really good. And I was like, hey, I saw this documentary you did. He's like, what? And I was like, the documentary. He's like, oh, are you serious? Where is that? I was like, oh, I just found it on Amazon Prime. And then we talked about that a lot. And he told his girlfriend, which is another editor that I wanted to speak to. And he was like, yeah. And she was like, she ended up being someone that really like pushed me to people and sent my resume out to people. She's like, yeah, no, Isaac told me that you watched this documentary. Yeah, he was really impressed and everything. And I was like, oh, great. So little gestures like that seem little, but, you know, they really count.
I do
a lot of
mention in my
times.
book, it's very good idea to write down some questions you have before you're interviewing or meeting with somebody, that so that, you know, you come, you know, especially like, you know, when you're meeting with somebody like Troy, like if you come to coffee and I go, okay, so what are we talking about? And they go, which happens to me sometimes, they go, I don't know. I just thought we'd have coffee. I'm like, okay, really? You you know, if you don't come with some questions for Troy or questions for Andres or whoever you're having coffee with, this, you know, you kind of blew it. So you know, and they don't have to be hard questions, or you could just be like, can we talk about, I watched Jawbreaker, can you talk about what it was like editing Jawbreaker, you know, or whatever, you know, but just, come prepared when you're meeting people for coffee, even if, and that includes when you're meeting people, that are at your level or below you. I mean, obviously there isn't that many questions that I can have if I'm meeting Emma for coffee, the first time. I'm like, other than you know that I have this question. So when are you moving here? Where are you living? Why are you living here? What do you want to do? So I have, I know what questions I'm asking. So anyway.
Yeah, and I found that also getting like asking not super personal questions, but kind of just asking like friendly questions. 'Cause I've noticed that people really, I really like to kind of get to know people. I like kind of hearing about their perspective and such. And I would always ask people kind of back, because this was like back in, last year, and the pandemic was like ravaging the world. Sadly, still is in some places. But I would always ask people like, how have you been since the pandemic started? Kind of where were you? Kind of what happened? And kind of people would kind of talk to me about that and get real, and then kind of like it's like then like all of a sudden like these really personal details I'm like hearing, and like I'm exchanging as well, because it's like it's a conversation. This is how people work. And then it's like kind of it built kind of a deeper relationship with some people sometimes just by asking of how they've been. So it's really that simple, I guess.
Okay, so I make sure everybody that's here, you download the stuff I put into the chat, which are like resumes, and you'll find very interesting things like the 5-year plans are both Jen's and Andres. You can see I highly recommend having like a 5-year plan and a 1-year plan. That's sort of like, what do I want to accomplish in my first year in LA or wherever you're moving? And and this is true even if you don't want to be an editor. It's like the concept of kind of understanding where you want to be is very, very helpful. You'll see with the cover letter. So make a practice cover letter. Just, if you don't have me around, but I'm sure that if you made one and you sent one to me or Andres or Emma, we'd read it and we'd give you notes. But make it up yourself so that I don't have to like make it up, but be like, okay, so find some TV show or movie you like, find out who the editor or assistant editor is, and write a cover letter so you have it. Because literally when Emma got the thing from me about this movie that she's on, she had the cover letter ready again, like that night, and she was the only one that had it ready that night, and I sent it in, and I think that really impressed everybody. And so that's what you want to be prepared for, is this concept that these jobs come and go really fast. It's like, even if they might not hire the assistant editor, by the time they have like 4 resumes, they're like, okay, I have 4 resumes, I don't really need any more. So be prepared to be able to send things in really fast. So work on your own 5-year plan. You can see that they saw that Andres and Jen basically kind of worked off each other's a little bit. So write out yours too. I had everybody do that with my that were in my class. I think if anybody is planning on coming here soon, moving here soon, please contact us. We will happily meet up with you. We will happily. One thing that I was talking to Emily about is like, if you don't know LA, you really should talk to us about where to live in LA, because LA is huge. And you could be like, oh, Burbank looks great. Oh, things are so cheap up in Chatsworth. And I'm like, do you really want to live in Chatsworth? I would do the same. It's like, if I was moving to New York, like, I don't know really the difference between parts of Queens and parts of Manhattan. And I mean, I know Manhattan, okay, but I have no idea what different parts of Queens is like. So take advantage of the fact that you have some people here that live here. I know that several of you are planning on moving here soon. Let me know when you're moving here. I highly recommend, and not everybody wants to do this, but I highly recommend moving to LA with somebody if you're going to be working, because as you can tell from Andres, you get your jobs literally through your roommates. Literally, that's how you're going to end up getting 99% of your jobs, is through your friends. That's the way this industry works. So I'm going to have a party at my house on June, hold on, for my students, but anybody from Columbia College can come.
Mhm.
June, hold on, what is it? Everybody, somebody could tell me, but I can just do it myself. June 13th, we're going to have a get together at my house, probably in the late morning, probably like 11 to 3 we'll do it. Faith, if you're gonna are you gonna be able to make it, Faith?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And so that's, anybody else that happens to be here or wants to be here, that's when we're doing something. And then I think we're going to do something again, maybe in August or sometime, because I have a few students that are not moving out till July.
Right.
But anyway, and Paula has a hand.
I do actually. I am curious about the neighborhoods, or maybe the communities. Culver City, I heard, is okay.
Culver City's great.
Um, over the mountains in Culver City is Baldwin Hills.
Mhm.
Or Windsor Hills. I have a cousin
Yeah.
in Windsor Hills. But what are the areas that you recommend?
Okay, so essentially what happens in LA is you find where you want to live and you commute, because you have no idea where you're going to work next. You might work at Fox, you might work at Disney, you might work in Hollywood, you might work downtown. So you find a place that you want to live, and that's where you move. I don't recommend you moving too far in some direction that becomes problematic for a commute. Like if you move to Long Beach, that's fine if you worked at Sony, but that's really far to Disney. So essentially, you want to be this. LA is sort of a strip. There's a hill, which is the Hollywood Hills, Santa Monica Mountains to the Hollywood Hills. That you just think of it as a strip, and you kind of want to be along that, really. So if you are in the valley, you want to be in the Encino, Van Nuys, Valley Village to Burbank. Like as far, you don't really want to get to Glendale. Burbank is kind of the end that way, and Encino is kind of the end to the west. And then along inside, you can go Santa Monica, Century City, Hollywood, through Koreatown, or maybe Los Feliz or something like that. Then you can go, like Paula's talking about, a little lower, which is the Culver City, Baldwin Hills area, but you don't want to get too far south, like past Inglewood or so. Like once you hit that, if you get over that next set of hills, you might be like, oh, that's a really long commute to Disney. So, which is fine if that's what you want to do. Some people don't mind an hour commute each way. I don't necessarily recommend it. But I do know people that live down in Long Beach or up in Glendale. It's just, if you're in Glendale and you work at Fox, it's literally an hour and a half each way and can be 2 hours of traffic. You don't want that in your life. I mean, I don't want that in my life. So, I particularly kind of recommend for people that don't have a lot of money and you're just moving to try to look into that Valley Village, Toluca Lake area, because you can get to Hollywood really easily, and it's not that far getting to Fox, really. If you like living in Hollywood, if you like being really in a city, you have that West Hollywood area that's very affordable, but it's a little more rough and tumble. So you have to be, if you're that type of person, like Andres likes to be like, I want to be somewhere where I can walk to bars and get drunk and walk home. That's why he's choosing his neighborhood to live in.
Yeah, and also, like the distance, it's like, so you work, long hours on these jobs, and after like a 12-hour day, I really don't want to kind of spend an hour driving, and it's heaven. It's heaven to be able to get out of the job. It's like 8 p.m., 8:30 p.m., kind of like, and I can just drive for like 15 minutes home. And that is like one of the biggest things for me because I just signed the lease at an apartment. Jesus Christ. I don't know if you guys heard that. And yeah, now it's like, it's a 20-minute commute. So it's like, so it's for real. Cause it's like, I could have gone a way cheaper place, like that was an hour away, but I wouldn't want to do that after such a long day. I really only have, even being so close to the studio, I kind of have like 3 hours after work where I can kind of chill and do stuff by myself, kind of like, so those become precious. So you don't want to be driving for all of them.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Okay. Any more questions before we wrap this up? Okay, so how many people? I do have a question for you. How many people are moving out here soon and gonna start looking for work? So we have at least 4 or 5. So that's great. I'm really looking forward to meeting Paige and Faith and Paula in person because they've been on lots of Zooms with me. And Emily. Emily's moving here and then going to Hollywood Film Academy for like a year and a half. So that'll be fun. That's right in the middle of Hollywood. But definitely take advantage of the fact that these people, and don't be shy, because being shy is not to your advantage in this industry. You can be shy, like Emma is shy, but being shy and not reaching out is a whole different thing, And Emma's not that shy, but honestly, she can hold, you have a conversation with her, she's great. Like I said, she's one of the people, though, however, if you're at a table with like 6 people, she will probably not talk a lot.
Groups make me nervous.
The first time that Emma met us, it was like, I can't imagine, I don't know how many people were there, but it was definitely a hardcore intro for friend group. And yeah, I'm surprised.
Yeah, because that's when Jen had her family and everything, right? And then you came over for barbecue after that. But what I did, which is very helpful, is she has a boyfriend that is talkative. So she had like a wingman that came and met with us.
Yeah, it definitely helped a lot. And actually, it's great because he's really happy to have met everyone too now, because he doesn't know very many professionals. So if through me, I helped him in a way by being shy, so he can thank me later. Yeah.
Okay, so any more questions before we wrap this up? Last chance. Okay, well, I'm looking forward to seeing some of you in LA, and feel free to reach out. And I'm sure, honestly, especially reaching out to Andres and Emma, because Emma will start work and then she will start hearing about jobs all the time, where they'll walk into her room and say, Emma, do you know anybody for this PA job on this other movie that my friend is starting? So take advantage of the fact that you now know some people. It's up to you. I'm not going to beg you anymore. I've begged you like 4 times, 7 times this conversation already. I can't beg anymore. So I will see some of you in LA, and thank you for listening, everybody else. Okay. I'm going to end the conversation now. I'm stopping recording.